We here at Angry Me Production want to thank our sponsor, Mobile Notary Mindy. She's certified with the National Notary Association. She's also bonded and E&O insured. She offers a wide range of services including wills, powers of attorney, medical documents, healthcare proxies, living wills, certification of trust, assignment of personal property, HIPAA waivers, advanced healthcare directives, and 99 verification. You can find her on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Mobile Notary Mindy. You can also visit her webpage at TexasMobileNotaryMindy.com. That's TX, MobileNotaryMindy.com. Thank you so much, and enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen of all ages, boys and girls, thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Angry Me Production. We appreciate you coming in and letting us be a part of your lives, week in and week out. We hope to do our best to present you with something that your eardrums delight in. Whether you're looking at us on YouTube or Rumble, or listening to us on Spotify, Google, or Anchor, or any of the other podcast services that we are currently on or trying to get on, we thank you. And if you don't mind, at the end of every episode, stop by, leave us a comment, leave us a like. If it asks for 5 stars, we'll take 5 stars, even if you don't like us. 5 stars are what it's all about. With that being said, we hope you enjoy our attempt to make our advocation our vocation. Ladies and gentlemen, let the games begin.
Welcome, Angry Faithful. Today on Psychos and Sociopaths, and we're not doing the what the hell episode for this one. We're going to do in Psychos and Sociopaths because it's more criminal thinking, is media versus cops. And I have BC Sanders from the Disruptor podcast, or Brian Sanders, what he wants to be known now. Why did you get rid of BC?
I'm retired, so I don't have to go by initials, and I like being Brian Sanders because that's who I am. So I want to be a normal person and not be identified by letters and dots. It sounds crazy, but I enjoy my somewhat recent retirement. So yes, please call me Brian.
Now, I try to wear something like festive and colorful and everything. He's bringing out the guns out on this one. It's just, I'm fairly. So if you're looking at this on YouTube, and you're getting like starry eyes for Brian there, he's married now, just recently, but married to a wonderful woman that I have watched on Andrea Up All Night. But and sometimes I peek into the live and start chatting it up. And it was last week. I just did that. It was like, dude, you need to cover up those guns.
Yeah, we do the live show on YouTube every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's a blast. I was fortunate enough at the time when she was like, because she's been doing it for a while, but she's like, hey, do you want to jump on basically permanently as a co-host? And it's true crime. And my background doing homicides as a detective, then later as a sergeant, then as a lieutenant. I've got several years under my belt. So we cover cases. She reaches out to family members. Sometimes they reach out to her, and she's also gotten a response from a person, I'll say, that is incarcerated for some murders. So we're kind of doing some things and trying to just, get involved more with cases than just surface level. And so oftentimes it's things where we may go over a case that is open source. So in other words, like there's already been a trial, conviction, and you can actually read some of the police reports, the summaries, if maybe a FOIA or whatever has been done. And when we go back through those, in some cases we don't even cover on the show, but we may be able to answer questions for the family members and be able to explain, hey, this seems like some type of a crime, but possibly it may have been more of a natural event. Like, for example, when people go missing and it's almost like they vanish off the face of the earth. But then you look closer at an area where they may have been traveling or maybe be walking on foot or whatever. And then you have to start to look at, hey, there's a large body of water near that area, or that roadway goes over a river. So if they're walking on foot or they're doing whatever, potentially they could end up in a body of water. So it's just things like that, you know, we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes that, you know, we feel a lot better when we can talk to people and answer those kind of questions. But yeah, every Tuesday night we do it, and it gets uploaded, you know, Spotify, Apple, all those platforms, as well as YouTube. But it's Andrea Uplate is the YouTube channel, and Night Shift with Andrea Uplate is the actual show title. And then I do the Disruptors with Brian Sanders,
which is totally what's funny is because I listen to yours every once in a while. You know, there's a plethora of podcasts, and I'll go.
There's so many out there.
It's hard to keep up, but you even the most recent one with the oh man, he's a photographer.
Oh, Stan Lake.
Yeah, Stan Lake.
Yeah.
My dyslexia kicked in. I was like, Stan Lee, he's in the necromancy.
He invented Marvel characters.
Yeah, and he was interesting. And me and Brian have the one thing that we both hate together is snakes. And I'll tell you a story that I was doing. I finally started getting exercise and everything. And this is when I was on a night shift. Now I'm on a day shift. And like 3 o'clock in the morning, I was doing my run. It was about a 2-mile run. And I had a baby rattlesnake. And I carry it with me because, you know, I can deal with people. I can't deal with animals. And a baby rattlesnake came right in front of me. And I unloaded. And I was like looking around. I was like, I better get out of here, but I'm gonna have to explain this.
Yeah, I don't dig them, man. And the funny thing is, that last episode you're talking about with Stan, he and I've been friends on Instagram for several years now, since I first started Instagram a couple years back.
Yeah,
and you know, we're touching like some of those categories in the show that he falls in. But man, the guy writes poetry. I mean, and he's funny to talk to as well. So it's like I don't know that we even got into a whole lot of the poetry on that episode, but his photography is amazing. His videos, like he's always handling creatures and that sort of thing. But the episode before his, I have Michael McColgan on there, who was the first lead singer Dropkick Murphys, former soldier in an artillery unit, and Boston firefighter, formed Dropkick or Street Dogs after Dropkick Murphys, and Street Dogs did tours for years and years and years. They're playing shows now, but talking to that guy as well, man, it's like so humble. And I've seen Street Dogs play numerous times, and as well as Dropkick Murphys. But he's always been just really cool to first responders and, you know, people that work in the trades, and just a down to earth guy as well. All musicians should be that way. But we know that like other bands, as they get larger, or people get substance abuse problems or whatever, their egos take over, and they forget that, you know, people are paying money to go see them play the music that they enjoy. And for me, Dropkick Murphys' album Do or Die, which he sang on, incredible. That's what got me hooked. And then later, when he was doing Street Dogs and they were putting out so many albums, I tell everybody, go listen to Street Dogs, any of their albums. Every song has some kind of meaning, and sometimes it's people who have influenced the songwriters, or sometimes it's social issues. Sometimes it's things about the news and the media, and how citizens, it feels like at times we're getting divided and we're being pitted against one another for ratings and that sort of thing. So he's one of those people that has traveled in both worlds, you know, as a firefighter in Boston, as a soldier, you know, in combat arms, and then as well in the music realm. And I don't know, I really, really enjoyed talking to him. He was on my list from the very beginning when I started the Disruptors because
he
he hit those categories. But yeah, I mean, you know, we could talk all day about music and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I want everybody to know, like, go check them out.
Yeah.
Like I said, they're playing some shows right now, and I think they're starting to kind of. I know that they've sold out some shows, but man, they're just so good.
Was he the one that he's the first person to sing "Ship Me Out to Boston"? Because that's where I started falling in love.
So this is the thing. When Dropkick Murphys started, they had a couple what we call 7-inches or like little EP records back then. Okay. Then they did "Do or Die," which is a full-length album. He sang on that. And then shortly after that, they may have had one more EP, I think, that he was on. But shortly after that, he got hired on with the Boston Fire Department. And that was one of the things that he always wanted to do. And so he became a firefighter. And then Al Barr, who was with the Bruisers, took over Dropkick Murphys as their lead singer. And then from then on, was in their lineup. And so Shipping Up to Boston was Al Barr singing. So really great singer. I saw Al Barr with Dropkick Murphys and the Pie Tasters years ago. Man, maybe it was like late 90s. Early 2000s. It's probably early 2000s, actually, now that I think about it. But incredible show. Lars Frederiksen and the Bastards, I think, opened up for Dropkick as well during that show. I get them a little confused, but man, no. So Dropkick Murphys as well, like Shipping Up to Boston and stuff. Different singer, but as far as I know, all of them are friends. There's no beef. That's the best thing about punk and hardcore is like. Bands kind of form and people move on and do other stuff, but usually there's no bad blood, man. I don't know. I love that. I love that I was able to grow up in a scene too that taught me if there's something I want to do, go do it. So whether it's a fanzine and going to shows and interviewing bands or meeting, musicians and that sort of thing, and then writing about them and creating your own publication when you're in high school or something. Or later in life, you have the ability to use technology like this, do a podcast, talk to people. And even in police work, the same thing. Like if I saw something that I thought, okay, we should probably try this, be it gang investigations or FBI RICO or whatever it is. My background from the whole punk and hardcore scene was like, do it yourself. So just make it happen. Go do it one way or another. Don't necessarily get caught up on the negative stuff. So same thing with the podcast. When I tell people, hey, when I first started the Disruptors, people were just kind of like, all right, whatever, another dude with a podcast. Like, yeah, but I love doing it. So I'm going to keep doing it. And I like when people give me feedback, either positive or negative, but I hope that people enjoy it. And the same thing now, being on night shift, it's like, we get feedback from, like I said, family members and listeners and people saying, hey, I really enjoy the chemistry, or I really, really enjoyed that you all took the time to explain this aspect in the case on the podcast, as opposed to just reading from Wikipedia or whatever, something like that. But yeah, man, I'm just, people always want to know, like, oh, you're so positive. And some people get negative about me being positive, but I've just kind of learned that if I focus on that, I usually can succeed at what I want to do. If I focus more on the positive as opposed to the negative, and that I reinforce in my brain bands like Street Dogs or Dropkick Murphys or Rancid or any of these bands in the punk scene are still around. Sick of it all. Like, these bands are still around, touring, making records, fully relevant. And they've been doing it for like 30 years. And they all started out the same way. A couple of people getting together, forming a band, and then singing about something that matters to them and fortunately matters to a lot of us. And they've been able to do it most of their lives. So I like doing podcasts. I like jumping on as a guest. I like talking about stuff. This is like the equivalent of me and you jumping on a phone call back in the day. Like when we were younger or something, everybody talked on phones.
Yeah.
Like, I miss that. I miss conversations. So there we go. What are we going to talk about?
I know, right? We're already like 13 minutes in this, and I'm like, I don't want to stop it, and it's so fun. But no, the real reason we're here is media versus cop, because your job before this was law enforcement. Like you said, you were a homicide detective. Now, when I was working corrections, and this is a while ago, we were always told if anything happens and gets out, and something that's displeasing for people's ears, is like, oh, they beat up a lot of. I've heard that at one point in time there was a fight club in a prison. Not saying it was our prison, but it was at a prison.
Yeah.
And that got out in the media. One thing a lot of reporters like to do is like grab somebody that doesn't really have the media experience or talking to people experience, and they'll grab them and they'll like try to corner them in and try to get them to spill the beans. That's why we have PR departments. If a reporter comes to me when I was working in corrections and like, is this happening? I was like, I don't know. I just work here. But every law enforcement and every department that's big enough, they have PR departments to where they answer the questions, and you're supposed to even. How many times have you been on reporting on a homicide that you were divvying into?
Never. You mean to the media? Yeah. I'm gonna jump in because a lot of people don't understand that departments, especially the larger departments. Well, let me say it's the large city departments usually have their own PR or public relations unit. A couple of people in, that's what they do every day. Now, what usually that unit will do is stay in direct contact with the investigative unit. And that unit can brief them up and say, okay, this is what we're willing to release without compromising an ongoing investigation. Sometimes departments can't release anything. If they do, they are now putting information out, one, that may not have been proven yet. Two, may mess up future parts of the investigation because evidence can be destroyed. Family members may find out from a media release that their loved one was murdered or is deceased or is, located, and the police department hasn't even been able to track down next of kin. And that has happened. You pick any department in the country, social media and the ability to cut and paste stories and all this stuff, social media accounts, family members have found out that their loved ones were murdered through social media, and then the police department's trying to find them as well to be able to do the notification. So public relations units, if they're really good at what they do, can put out very accurate information in a timely manner for the public, but that doesn't mean you're going to get all the information. Now, I've seen some sheriff's departments across the country sometimes, and I think it's because probably it's an elected position. So sometimes some sheriff's departments may feel the pressure from voters that they've got to answer to something, especially the higher profile cases. So if you're into anything that is related to, that could be part of a pattern killing or an active shooter situation or the death of a law enforcement officer, any of these things that will now get the attention of the media. Sometimes I've noticed patterns with sheriff's departments where they put information out and it hasn't been vetted yet. And sadly, now they got to kind of backtrack and correct that problem, which is almost impossible to do. Or whenever they come back and they start looking at those facts, then people say, oh, well, this sheriff's department, they don't know what they're doing. They're botching an investigation. And in reality, maybe they didn't botch the investigation. Maybe public affairs botched the information, or they just put it out a little too quickly. So the main thing, especially when it came to my realm, to homicides, we were very, very tight-lipped, even within our own department, because you have to focus on the actual investigation. You don't need to be running around, talking about the case, that sort of thing. You're just working it. And so the news often wants information, but you're also working an investigation. So if somebody within a department, let's say like a field operations or a patrol sergeant or someone like that, if just anybody gets in front of a camera or talks to the news, they may talk about something that they don't actually know about or put misinformation out there by mistake, only because that's what they know. And I've seen it happen with departments and different units, and it's frustrating. And it can cause a lot of problems within a department if everybody is not on the same sheet of music. And I'll also say this is for people to understand. And I preach it all the time in my training classes. You hear me sometimes mention it in podcasts and stuff, is being ego free. We always got to check it, like you got to check what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that ego can cause some of the biggest problems within a police department because people want to be part of the know. So if it's a homicide investigation, there could be a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, major, whatever, like pick a rank. They want to be sometimes part of that investigation. But if they are not part of that unit, there's not always a reason for them to be part of it. And so people shared, stories with me about that, where a person's ego got involved and then they wanted to be part of an investigation. And then they've put information out there that had not been verified yet. And it just stuff like that. You start to kind of get into some infighting. So without going off on a tangent, you just got to kind of be aware of that. So the way I look at it, the less a lot of times a police department talks about a very high profile case or an incident that may have just occurred, the better off they're probably going to be in the future. But citizens get mad about that. And if you were to go on, police department social media accounts and stuff, you'll see people making comments like, oh, no wonder the police aren't trusted. They won't put information out there. And when it comes down to the bottom line, some people just want to be entertained by the news. And the news is a business. Media is a $1 billion industry. So they're going to put stories out there that are enticing. So sadly, people want to watch the news to be entertained. And then when they're not entertained, they feel like they're not getting their money's worth, so to speak. So they get mad and they take to social media and they start putting these comments. And really poor police departments or poor police leaders who go through social media posts and really worry about some of that stuff, I think is highly distracting. I know you got to communicate with the public, but go communicate with the public. Don't fall for some of the trolls on social media and that sort of thing, because it can really derail leadership's ability to focus on the important things. So we constantly have to remember, myself included, that media is a business. Yeah. News stories are designed just like a movie trailer is, to catch your attention and give you just enough information that you want to tune in to more of their news broadcast or their social media or whatever. So you're not going to get the whole story in a police shooting or anything like that. You're going to be given just enough words to where you fall for it, me included, for that hook to click on it or to watch it or that sort of thing.
There's also another aspect a lot of people don't see, because it doesn't come to your mind. There are people out there that want to feel that they're part of it, and they'll even say they did it and they already have all of their information. I mean, and it's strange to even say that out loud. It's like, no, I was the person that ended up murdering these people and everything, and they got most of the information. Now they don't have all of it, and the cops go, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And they'll say yes or no, and then the cops will go, oh, he's just crazy. He's paranoid, brain or something like that. And and you can't really, it hurts the case so bad because you think you got a person, and you just found out that he just left the mental institution and he thought he did all this.
Yeah. Never, like when I was on the department, I never wanted to be in front of a news camera. I never wanted to talk to the news. I didn't want anything to do with that. So I was fortunate at that time that our department didn't really push a lot of that. Although I will say, sometimes there are people that I've worked with that I thought if they would be in front of the camera to talk about very specific things, be it, homicide, robbery, aggravated assault, patrol, whatever, if they are the experts in those fields, I would want them in front of the camera, because sometimes if you see the same person for a police department and maybe they don't relate to the community, or as someone's listening to them talk on the news and they go, like they don't really sound very confident, or they can't openly answer questions. I've watched a police chief who is really, really good with talking to news channels and answer questions, really great with talking to the community, and then also go into a meeting and absolutely boom, boom, boom. Let's stay on task. It's whatever, 10 o'clock, let's go. What have you got? What have you got? What have you got? All right, appreciate it. Make sure that happens. Report back to me with your findings. Was that actually a really good strategy you used, or do we need to switch it up? But that leader would put all of the responsibility on the person in the meeting. The same way with the news, would answer questions very accurately and not give too much information, but also be very, very respectful to people. And I would actually watch people and how they responded to that. And then I may watch another police leader who gets on and may bash, a potential suspect, or throw somebody's name out there ahead of the investigation. And that's why I say, like, the clips that I've either watched or people have sent to me or whatever are usually sheriffs, and usually they're one-term sheriffs, and that's kind of the bad part about that too, is what people don't realize is with sheriff's departments, a person can get elected to be a sheriff and have a terrible term and really run a police department or sheriff's department into the ground and then not get reelected. But the image of that sheriff's department carries on to the next sheriff. And so if it becomes negative like that, it can have some detrimental effects in the actual communities that those deputies are patrolling. But that's the main thing. Like the news and that sort of thing, what grabs headlines, still violence. And what they've learned in the last few years is anything to do with race or racial division. So basically serial killers, active shooters, and dividing people by race and giving this image that everyone hates one another. And it just, it's horrible. And I think because we take in so much media, social media, from our phones, our laptops, pumping gas, you're pumping gas, man. And there's news stories being, right there on a screen.
Yes.
For a gas meter that, or a gas pump that 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you're just kind of standing there with your own thoughts, trying not to huff the fumes and get high.
Here's the thing on that one that gets me is they have a sign that says, do not have your cell phone or whatnot while you're pumping gas, or you'll cause the explosions, and the TV pops up. I'm like, this is counterproductive, I believe.
Yeah, I wonder if, because one of my many nicknames when I was a kid was Safety Man, because I would see things before they happen.
Yeah.
So like two people may be wrestling, or as we say in the South growing up, like wrestling, and I'd be like, oh, y'all stop, because I would see someone going through the drywall, or someone's head getting split open on a coffee table, and it just went on and on. There are a bunch of other stories, but I've thought about that one before with the cell phone thing. And there's also a warning, it's been there forever, about static electricity.
Yeah.
So if you're putting your hands in and out of your pockets, I think you're building up, or you're releasing whatever
or
that
you're
static.
wearing a wool sweater. Or
Yeah,
something.
just a little spark or whatever, to ignite the fumes. But I'm the same way, man. And I'm also a rule follower. So I'm like, well, sometime that happened to somebody. So I'm just going to be cool and sit here, like I said, with my thoughts. But we're constantly taking the media in the news stories, and we're also hearing all the atrocities for us, even in America. But if you want to know all the atrocities of the world, you can sit there 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and take it all in. And I do believe that because these devices can capture so much information about what we're searching, what our interests are, that news outlets are obviously learning from that as well. And that's why I say the race, that tag, if anything is racially fused, people are getting sucked into it, and it's almost giving this image that things are getting worse in that sense. And the same thing with active shooters. If stories are constantly being run about active shooter incidents, that stays in the forethought of citizens. That wasn't necessarily an option 40 years ago. Every now and then you might have someone who has that thought and has the capabilities, and then they go do it. But it was very rare. But the more it becomes a constant thought and a constant reminder through news outlets, then you're going to see it more in society. And I wonder, with homicides and serial murders and patterns and things like that, the more we know about it, the more prevalent, obviously, that we think it's occurring.
Well, my thing on that is it's a double-edged sword to the fact of you need to inform people that there's someone out there that are targeting XYZ type of people, and you need safety precautions and everything. Unless you're a person like me and you, where we are trained to do, like, observe and everything, and some people the training doesn't click in. I understand that it happens, and there's over preparedness to where you can't not look at a door. If you're at a restaurant, it's like, hey, can you sit here, because I feel more comfortable looking at the door just in case something happens. I mean, the likelihood of it actually happening is very minute. It's like 0.0001 that it actually might happen. But there's some people, they think those percentages are like 85 because they watch the news.
But what you can avoid living that way, what you can avoid are the smaller things, the confrontations that could get physical. A person who walks in, they don't have a gun on them, they're not going to be an active shooter, but they walk into a restaurant already mad, already coming in to complain or throw their food, or they walk in and sadly they may be having a schizophrenic episode, and they come in. If you're paying attention, you go, I don't like the way that person's moving, something's clicking. You can get up and walk out. Like, you don't even have to wait around to see if you're right or wrong. Boom, move on out, or sit there, wait it out, watch. But one of those things I've had to relax as well. And Andrea is great at helping me do that. Was, early on, we were walking downtown where we live, and it was weird. It had been, a couple of months, and I really had, I was already retired, and we were walking, and it wasn't too late at night, but man, something happened, and it just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, I'm find myself, I'm like scanning, looking around. I don't know exactly what it was that bothered me, because it wasn't like we passed somebody and they were mean mugging me. And it felt completely unnerving, and I didn't like it.
The hairs on the back
she and I talked about it later, and I was like, I can't figure out what it is. My brain moves slow enough, and doing the job as long as I did, I could tell you, I could articulate every little thing. But there have been times, like when I've been in foot pursuits chasing someone, and then you go around the corner very slowly, and they say sliced pie, that sort of thing, and you're moving incrementally, and then all of a sudden, boom, you take off again, and or you hit an open parking lot and you're like, whoa, this person just vanished. You know, when you come around the corner and it doesn't feel right, and then all of a sudden you start checking on their cars and you're like, yep, there he is. So, but man, that was probably the last time that's happened. Off the top of my head, I did see a guy recently with a backpack on, and it drew my attention. I didn't like how heavy the backpack was hanging, because, you know, when you do surveillance and you're looking for people with weapons, you're looking for very specific things. One pocket of a jacket heavier than the other, so the hemline of the jacket's off. You're looking for people pinning the firearm against their side as they're walking around, so their gait's unnatural. You know, their left hand may be moving if they're right hand dominant, because they're pinning that weapon into the waistband of the pants or in a jacket pocket. And anytime I see a backpack that's kind of heavy or comes to an apex, you know, sometimes that can be the barrel of a short rifle or something like. Either way, it could be an edged weapon, an axe, whatever. It was just weird. I didn't like the way his backpack was hanging. I didn't like that he was just kind of scanning around, not standing, but scanning the crowd, and then walking by himself. So just, but it ended up being nothing, and it probably, you know, obviously it wasn't anything. So there's a difference, hypervigilance versus just kind of being relaxed, paying attention, and being able to slow your brain down a little bit. But if I didn't have the experiences that I have, you know, from working, then I may be so hyper vigilant that everybody I see, I think, is a constant threat. And it's kind of like you can assess people a little easier. But man, the news, if you're watching, you know, headlines and news stories, and I feel for kids too that, you know, are growing up or have grown up in the last 15, 20 years, and active shooters like constantly on their brain, and they're going to school, and the more prevalent active shooters are, also that trend of people calling in fake tips to schools or calling in threats because they don't want to go to school that day was a new phenomenon, just like bomb threats were, you know, 30 years ago.
Yeah,
shooter threats went up like that. And so the news would cover these stories that ended up being fake. Like when I was in an intel unit, 95% of the info coming in for any kind of leads on active shooters or lone wolf or whatever, you know, potential suspects, were false. But news stories would pick up on it, or somebody may have leaked a story from within a school or whatever, and then the news pops it up in the headline, and then it kind of creates that panic. And then now you've got all these students that are worried about going to school, you know, and that school specifically, because the news will mention it, you know, at said high school, you know, potential threat of active shooter. And it's like, you know, you're reporting it so fast, and that news cycle is moving so quickly that they sometimes are not even getting information back from a police department. And then those headlines hit, and kids go into panic, parents go into panic. And then you find out 95% of them are, if not 100% for some jurisdictions, completely false. Like there's nothing to it. And they didn't even need to report that news story. They didn't need to cause that kind of panic in a person's life. But that keeps the viewers coming back, and it keeps them hooked in. And to the point where when I'm trying to explain to people the reality of threat assessment and things like that, people are like, do you not watch the news? This happens all the time. It's like, stop. Like, I'm telling you my reality. I'm telling you this is a trend across the country that ebbs and flows, and people call in a lot of false leads or false information about a potential threat at a school because they don't want to go to school that day. You know, or they enjoy creating news stories the same way, you know, some firebugs or arsons love to create a fire because they want to see the news. They want to see fire trucks and stuff and engines responding, and it's almost like a control issue.
That's kind of a sad one, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now on the other spectrum of that, what about I guess you would say the you can call them like celebrities of YouTube now, and they're sheriffs, like Sheriff Grandy Judge. Have you ever heard of him? A Judd? He's a
I don't think
sheriff.
so.
He's a sheriff in Polk County Sheriff's Department, and he became infamous about apparently someone. And this is a year ago, but now it's more prevalent for some reason. But it happened like a year ago where someone broke in to a person's house. The person shot him. Guy ran off, and he had to go on media going, "Hey, we know that you're getting robbed. We have all their information. You're getting robbed. We would like to have you come forward. If anything, we'll give you shooting tactics." And he was being honest about it. And he's like, "We'll give you shooting tactics, but so you can get rid of." I mean, he's a little blunt. He's like, "We'll give you shooting tactics because we want to less the community's price on the sheriff's department from paperwork and everything, so you can get rid of the problem." What about like sheriffs like that? I mean, a lot of people are praising that man. And then there's another one in Louisiana that did a whole I guess commercial. I would say it was like, "Hey, we know you guys are out here. You're goblins. You're this." Now I think
remember that. Yeah,
he's a congressman.
Okay.
And what do you have to say about that type of stuff? Is it helpful to the police department, or is it hurtful to any kind of law enforcement?
Yeah, I can say for me, I don't ever want anybody to view a sheriff or a law enforcement supervisor or a chief with anything other than trust and to understand, hey, that person is highly intelligent, highly effective at what they do. And this is the one that people don't fully understand, but fully capable of violence to protect a third party or protect a person or themselves from being harmed. Like, that's what I want to see. What I worry about is when police leaders do say things sometimes that are a little more emotionally filled, or draws a hard line in the sand and says it's us versus them, or demeans or uses terms. And I think the one video you were talking about, I think he says gremlins, if I remember right.
Yes, gremlins. Yes.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, like someone sent me that video, or I watched it maybe like on YouTube or something,
I might have
this
seen
was
it.
several years ago, if I remember right.
Yeah, it happened because he's a congressman now.
Okay. Yeah. That's not my approach. And it never was my approach. And I think that it can be dangerous when leaders do that, because they themselves may be fine. They may be able to check their emotions. They may be able to say, hey, I was just saying that because I was frustrated, but I want the community to understand we're crime fighters and we're going to go after drug dealers and gang members. I just think a message can come across better, more professional, and also set the tone for the entire department, because a police leader sets the tone. So if a sheriff or a chief comes in and says, I hate criminals and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and I won't, and this has been said for years in a lot of police departments, zero tolerance. So there would be certain areas where a lot of violence was occurring, so they would say zero tolerance, everybody's getting a ticket tonight, or everybody's getting stopped. That never made sense to me. So it's kind of like carpet bombing an entire village when all you're trying to do is find one or two or three insurgents, or you're trying to break up a terrorist cell. You don't go in and carpet bomb an entire village or level an entire town to find two or three people. So that's the way zero tolerance, to me, it didn't translate onto the street. The problem is when those projects will go on, or those initiatives, departments will go in, write everybody, stop every car moving, write every ticket, and then there wouldn't be a shooting that night, or there wouldn't be violence occurring in that small area. And then they would say, oh, well, see, zero tolerance works. And it's like, no, the police presence works. The blue lights or the lights going on, the activity works because gang members and criminals are talking back and forth, and they're like, yo, it's hot tonight. Don't be out. Don't have any guns on your hardware, whatever. Like, leave the poles at home. Just kind of get through the night without getting arrested. But the citizens who are getting all these tickets and these charges live in the violent neighborhoods, and they're going, why are you stopping me, harassing me, write me a ticket for whatever, trespassing or whatever, pick a charge, or driving a vehicle, some vehicle charge. And it's like, when there's a murder here last week, or there was a shooting here, and I got gang members out here, why are y'all writing me these tickets? And you've got officers going, well, zero tolerance. Like, my chief, in their minds, I'm saying, chief set the tone that, everybody who breaks the law is a criminal, and they're lower than me, and I'm up here. That's not like that. That's how that tone can get set. I'm not saying those sheriffs have set that tone in their departments. I'm saying talking that way can send that message. One of the best, I would say, crime fighting perspectives and speakers in the sheriff realm that I've heard was in Arizona, was Sheriff Mark Lamb.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And he's got a pretty good social media following. He got into the political realm, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Is that the one that he had everybody in his jails wear like pink uniforms?
That was Arapayo, I believe is how you pronounce it.
I think so.
But I know who you're talking about. No, Sheriff McLam was within the last 10 years, 12 years, and I can't remember how many terms he was elected, but he was a younger guy when he got elected, and he was just like, to watch his videos, very straightforward, very approachable. I met him several years ago.
Oh, now I know who you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
I listened to him like, God, what was he on? Oh, he was on Sean Ryan show.
Okay. Yeah. So when I met him, we were talking, he and his second in command at the time, he's on Instagram, Deputy One Time, Matt Thomas. I've had him on the show twice. He's got a great book that he wrote, he himself, Matt did, about his investigations, his experience fighting cartels, working undercover, working patrol, all these things, how he grew up. And it book's called The Interceptors, or just Interceptors. Great book. But his boss, his Sheriff Lamb, but when I was talking to him and Matt, this was at like SHOT Show back in maybe 2020, I think, because Matt had on a skill set t-shirt, and I used to write for that magazine, so that's how we just struck up a conversation. Yeah. But Sheriff Lamb, one of the things he was saying was basically, like, we're focusing on cartels because that's one of the number one problems we have in our area, and recruiting. And his thing was like, I care about the deputies, I care about the community, and I've got the right people in charge. And so his second in command, Matt, his background, so you're looking at the top of the food chain. I think Matt has got over 30 years, if not right at 30, but has done things on every level, from patrol, motorcycles. Then he worked undercover. He worked cartels. They did patrols out in Arizona in the desert. They were intercepting cartels. And so he has a working knowledge of crime fighting. And he also is that's a great guy to talk to. So even on the episodes he's been on, like, we just have great conversations. But I would say Mark Lamb, when he was sheriff, put the message out there of, we're going to continue to fight crime. We're going to continue to put proactive assets, like units that are going out there and going after drugs and gangs and cartels and human traffickers. And we're going after the most violent offenders in society. And we're also going to do it in an era in police work when all these large cities were pulling back, and they were shutting down their gang units, and they were shutting down the drug units and any kind of proactive assets, and then pumping up what these cities were calling community units or community squads. And and really trying to put this image out there of these friendly officers. And the feedback from a lot of cities, you got citizens that are living in horribly violent neighborhoods, and yet, you know, their departments are putting out, hey, we did this ice cream function. And I'm not taking away from that. That's cool. Do the ice cream function, but also go into those violent neighborhoods and make very strategic arrests so that the citizens that live in that type of violence go, okay, cool. Do all the ice cream functions you want, make TikTok dance videos in uniform, whatever you want to do. But I need a crime fighter that's going to show up and arrest the guy that we see every day in the neighborhood with a gun in his waistband, threatening grandkids or wanting people to join his gang, or heaven forbid you have cartel activity in those cities. Like, that's the balance. So I think like Mark Lamb will be a perfect example at that time when he was in office, and Matt as well. If you listen to Matt talk about, we're going to continue doing proactive things because it drives violent crime down. So when you look at their statistics in an era for, whatever, the last 10 years, that kind of time frame, or 8 years or whatever, their violent crime was continuing to go down while other cities were going up. And that's the correlation, is a sheriff or a police leader, if they can get in front of the camera and explain, we will not destroy our proactive units. We will not change our focus because we are crime fighters. We are protectors, and we know exactly how to disrupt violence in neighborhoods. Because if you look at, and I'm going off on a tangent a little bit, but if you look at companies and businesses, and a business, the way they make money and profit is they make their product better or their customer service better. UPS is a prime example. They deliver packages. They've been doing it for over 100 years. And the company has continually grown because they focus on their product is actually delivering a package on time. Customer service, professionalism, all of that. Now, UPS doesn't call me and say, hey, what do you know about package delivery? Because I don't. I mean, I kind of do because I used to work for UPS in college. But the example is, you know, companies really know their craft because they're listening to their own employees. They do get feedback from customers, and I get that. But think about in the police world. Think about if a chief or a sheriff sat in a room and told their leaders, like that are under them, you know, their command staff, their subordinates, but they're captains, lieutenants, majors, whatever. And they told them, hey, look, I went to a community meeting, and in this neighborhood, they really, really, really said they want us to clamp down on speeding. So that's what we're going to do. And I need you all to go out there and write as many speeding tickets as you can because the citizens said they're sick of speeders in their neighborhood. And you're like, okay, cool. But then you look at the actual crimes being occurred in that small area, and you realize speeding, you haven't had a fatal crash there in 10 years. You haven't had DWI arrests there in 10 years, but you've had 10 traffic stops per shift constantly because officers are on patrol there. But what you do have in that area is violence, that you have gun arrests there, drug arrests, that sort of thing. Like, that's what you need to be focusing on. Yeah. So just because some citizens, well, what I'm saying is, like, just because some citizens have expressed and they live in that area that speeding is their number one concern, police departments need to make sure they fully grasp and understand violent crime and understand the crimes that are occurring in their own jurisdiction. Listen to citizens, always take feedback, but also have a spine, also understand that you are the expert and that you're going to set the tone. And that tone is going to be professionalism. It's going to be kindness and courteousness and that sort of thing until it's go time. So the best departments hire people with a very solid temperament, that have very strong work ethic, that care about what they're doing, and then go after violent crime. And if you work in a department and there's not a whole lot of violence, then cool. If speeding is the number one problem you have because you're having collisions and you're having people dying in fatal wrecks in a certain section of highway or a certain section of roadway in your city, then by all means, form a traffic enforcement unit, write tickets, be present, peak hours of rush hour traffic, have a patrol unit out there with some blue lights going, do whatever you got to do to drive those collisions down. Cool. But don't worry about a speeding complaint in a neighborhood where you're going to shootings and there's drug activity, or there's a gang presence there. That's the difference. And a police leader should be able to get in front of a news camera and say, I fully understand that the message is we need to humanize the badge, or we need to, do these buzzwords. But also remember, our job is to fight crime. Our job is to go and disrupt violence. And I think that a lot of people don't understand how capable a police department, a sheriff's department, or federal agency can be when the focus is fully directed at that. You can gather intel or intelligence or information inside of a neighborhood. You can get hyper-focused on a criminal organization operating there. You can disrupt these things with a very few officers or deputies if the focus is there. But you got to have a chief or a police leader willing to let those units do what they do best, and then be willing to get in front of the camera and say, yes, I fully support my officers or my deputies. I've set the tone for this department. They are highly professional, and look at the work they've done. Your violence is down. Your car break-ins are down. Like, our formal complaints from citizens down.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's the story that needs, I think, to be portrayed by police leaders. Now, when I first got on the department, one of the big pushes at the time was go be a crime fighter, go do this job because you love it, and you're going to get better and better and better at it. And we as a profession back then didn't necessarily put a whole lot of information out to the news or to the media. We didn't have these social media accounts. Everybody was fully focused on what they call beat management, or patrolling your area of responsibility and owning it, and knowing the grandmothers that live there, and knowing the corner stores and apartment managers, and just knowing the inner workings of your zone, your beat, your area. But a whole lot of information didn't go out from police departments to the news or the media.
Yeah.
Which was a double-edged sword. Violent crimes were decreasing in a lot of cities. And in my experience, it would kind of ebb and flow depending on proactive assets and who you've got in the field and who's doing what. But as a whole, our profession was not explaining a whole lot of the hard work that units were doing behind the scenes. So some departments would have, say, like a street crimes unit, a gang unit, a drug unit. Everybody kind of has a similar mission to go after violence or street crimes that are occurring on that level. But a lot of citizens had no clue their own police departments had these units. So really? The running joke would be, like, if I met some citizen, and they would find out I was a police officer or something, they would be like, "Oh, don't write me a ticket." And I'm like, well, you don't have to worry about me writing you a ticket. Like, if we run into one another, like, you're either part of a criminal organization or you're tied into a homicide or something bad has happened in your life. Like I've never written a speeding ticket, so I don't, that there are multiple facets to the job, but the average citizen didn't know that. They still don't know that. So all the news stories and the media coverage that will show something like, let's say, an officer getting out of their vehicle and in a half a second shots are being fired, and taglines will be, officer shot first or something, or, whatever it is. And then I can watch the same clip and go, well, of course the officer drew down and shot. That person's elbow came up. And what is that indicative of? Probably a firearm in the front of the waistband. What was the nature of the call? Shots were fired earlier, say at a gas station or something, or a robbery in progress, and this person's fleeing the scene wearing the same clothing that a citizen called in, or a surveillance team could have been watching the person saying, hey, this person's, indexing, they've touched, I think they got a gun. They start running, and all of a sudden that elbow comes up. It's not a natural reaction to be running and then pull one arm up.
Yeah.
But if I want to draw a pistol out of the front of my waistband, that's the motion I'm coming, right?
Yeah.
So as an officer, we see these things and will react in a split second because we know what's coming. And so when that arm comes up and then that person starts to turn, the officer may have seen just the barrel of that weapon and boom, they're shooting. But a YouTube video may depict from a different angle that this officer just pulled their gun out in cold blood, shot and killed someone. And sometimes news stories will leave out the fact that there was a weapon that was on scene or a firearm. They'll leave certain aspects out because it hooks the person in better. Yeah. And I hate it because there's almost this this feeling now that the average citizen will start to immediately take the side of a citizen or a news story and believe that the police officer was right off the bat wrong, should be charged, put him in federal prison or whatever, never slowing down and going, hold on, like, what did the officer see from their perspective and what is their training? Here's a perfect example. I have had a professor who was in charge of a department in a college call me one time. I was on an intel unit, and he had several graduate students, and one of the students was doing, I guess, like their thesis based on police reform.
Okay.
And so the professor was like, this student is doing this research, and before I speak out of turn, basically what they believe police reform should be is this, and, listed a few of the criteria or whatever they're researching. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because every one of those points is part of our ongoing training. And at that time, I probably had, 10 or whatever, 15 years on the department. It was like, yeah, since I've been hired, those topics have been covered numerous times in training.
Okay.
And one of those topics, implicit bias, like our department had probably 4 times the amount of required time for that. So it's almost like we were overachievers in implicit bias. And, gender identity and special needs populations, religious rituals. I mean, like, pick all these topics. And we were doing those in service training and briefings and that sort of thing. And so it was interesting because it was an eye opener for me, because here I am in my world doing my police job.
Yeah.
Here, this college, this person, these students in this master's program are paying who knows how much, 50,000, 100,000, I don't know, for a master's degree. And their assumption was that police officers need to train more than just their police academy. So that they didn't even fully understand on the surface.
What's in
right.
The
They thought that we as a profession go through a police academy, and then for the next, 20 to 30 years, we do no training and we just walk around like robots enforcing laws.
Yeah.
But when I first heard it, I was like, man, like, no, this person's way behind the power curve.
Oh yeah.
But what I realized is we really didn't, for a long time, departments just didn't put information out like that. But also, viewers of the news and the media outlets could probably care less if there's a news story that says officers are, studying implicit bias, or officers, are in year 5 of reality-based training scenarios and have been working with simunitions and decision making, and they are fully understanding how the brain works and why they react the way they do. And they're studying stoicism, and they're into yoga, and they're into fasting, and they're fully understanding what sleep cycles are and how it affects the human body. Like the average police officer and deputy, at least my experience has been, are very, very focused on wanting to be professional and being balanced in life. Now, it wasn't always that way, but man, probably the last, I'd say 10 to 12 years, there was just that big push for that. I think that was kind of the counter to the image that was being portrayed of the profession, either via, YouTube videos or news outlets, social media. And so a lot of officers for a while were just like, I don't feel the love anymore. Like I'm out. I don't want to be a cop anymore, because they may have worked in a different part of a city where the average citizen wasn't cussing them out or reminding them of their pigment. Like that's one of the things that I have to tell people is like, this image that happens either through the news, where the news will run a story of a police involved shooting, and they'll put race in there, like white cop shoots unarmed black man. That's kind of like the tagline.
They don't put the race in there because it's not the race they want to actually, and that's really strange too.
Well, the interesting thing is, what has society done? For years, society said, especially like in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, was like, we're not going to get hung up on what category you are. Let's be a good person, judge me based on the content of my character. Like if I'm a good person and I'm obeying the law and I've got, a job and I take care of my responsibilities, I'm good to, people. Cool. Don't get hung up on these categories. And as a matter of fact, when I was in college studying, like my minor was sociology, my major was psychology. While I was studying sociology, that was one of the push at that time was to get away from racial identity, because the idea was, in order to stop racism and to stop, racial prejudice on that level, you take away the race identity, which made sense to me because I didn't grow up, excuse me, in an era where people were like openly racist and people were hating one another. If anything, the common message was bringing people together and just being cool with each other. And it was that way in the military. Nobody cared about pigment or anything like that. It was, we're all green. We're in an infantry platoon. Are you going to perform at the level I am? And am I going to perform at the level you are? And can we actually exceed that and get better and better and better and take care of one another and have fun doing it? Then cool. And now to look at these things like that, like a headline that may say, white cop shoots unarmed black man, then as citizens, we should always question what we're being told and think somebody had to sit down on a computer and somebody had to create that headline. And the way I understand it from some news outlets, a journalist may write an article, but someone else creates the headline.
Yeah.
And some journalists have actually resigned out of protest, so to speak, because they had written actual articles about crime. They've covered topics that are factual. And then an editor comes in and creates a tagline or a headline that actually gives you the impression of the opposite of what the article is. But the editor's name is not under that title. The journalist or the writer's name is under. And so they're catching the backlash, and they're having to defend and say, well, when you get down to article 3 or 4 or paragraph 3 or 4 in the article, it states in there that there was a firearm, that there was, the nature of the call was 5 different citizens calling in saying a man with a gun had fired shots, but by the time the officers get there, maybe the guy threw the gun over a trash can or something. So because I grew up in punk rock, because I questioned everything, like that again is like one of the lessons I learned. Question everything. Question politicians, question news outlets, companies, commercials. When you watch a commercial, why did they make this commercial a certain way?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the headlines. So if you're reading these headlines and you're not even reading the articles, because we've constantly got feeds coming in, and I'm snapping my fingers for emphasis because sometimes I
Yeah.
talk with my hands, but it is this just constant flow of information coming in, and we don't even have time sometimes to read the article. We just read the headline.
Yeah.
And if as citizens we don't question it, we start to believe this is happening in every city and that police officers are inherently racist. So this is the interesting thing. How can a police department, how can officers be inherently racist, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what some of the training would indicate, that we all have these implicit bias and that we're walking around. And sometimes some people may push a little harder than others and say, well, white officers, are more racist than any other category of officer. That to me baffles my brain. Like, it does not make sense to me, because most officers, and especially now, you're talking about the year 2024, the average incoming officer coming out of an academy and putting on a uniform and getting in a patrol vehicle was probably born around 2000, if not maybe a year or two after. So how can these are the questions I ask people. How can, if we're sticking to these racial categories, which I don't really dig too much, but if you're going to say whatever, Caucasian male is inherently racist officer, how? If they were born in an era that I would probably say would have been the most, I don't know,
cultural influence.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't, I almost guarantee you hate crimes, quote unquote, black versus white, right, would have probably been at an all-time low. Klan, KKK activity, all-time low. Nazi skinhead movement, all-time low. Black Panther Party or Revolutionary Black Panther Party or any splinter off of that becomes maybe more extremist type, all-time low in that era, which is probably indicative of what was going on in our common culture or pop culture, whatever. So I don't understand people who hang on to that and either teach it in colleges now or say off the bat, well, that's a white officer. He already was thinking that black man was a threat. That's implicit bias. When a citizen sees an officer who happens to be a lighter pigment and they say, oh, that's a white male officer, he has to therefore see a young black male as a threat. That's implicit bias. They don't know the first thing about that officer. They have no clue how that officer grew up, what their insights are, what type of music they listen to, what their motive for becoming a police officer was. They don't understand that. And so when teaching implicit bias and people are learning about this buzzword, and basically it just comes down to racism, or really to prejudice, like preconceived notions. When a person says something about another person and is accusing them of being racist with no proof, that in itself is implicit bias. But no one really applies that to the police profession or argues that fact. And it blows my mind because it's so blatant. But news outlets will lead with things like that. They will direct the viewer or the reader to assume that this white man is racist because he shot an unarmed black man. Take race out, because I know for 20 or 30 years as a society, we kind of got away from that. I think kids were even being taught, or research had shown when kids were talking in kindergarten and someone would describe another person, they would say, oh, my friend over there with the red shirt, or my friend with whatever, blue shirt. They're not describing skin tone, because it really was not a thing like that. Yeah. Across the board, that was like mainstream culture. It's interesting that now my perspective is things are more divided in general, because people are taking on perspectives that I don't think they would have shared 20 years ago because of the influence of the news stories, the influence of social media and YouTube. That's what I'm trying to explain, is that the same people that maybe now are 40 years old, 50 years old, did not grow up experiencing racism. I used to talk to people a lot. Like the area I worked in on patrol was almost 100% black. There's a very small sliver Hispanic population, and then even a smaller sliver of, you know, white families. And I'm using those categories because in society nowadays, that's what we're doing. Yeah. Now, when I've talked to young teenagers at different presentations and that sort of thing based on gang culture and decisions made down the road, and I'm talking to teenagers, and some of those teenagers in these presentations are living in the most violent neighborhoods, have brothers and sisters who are in gangs, that sort of thing. So we can talk openly. I'm not in there, you know, giving some slogan. I'm actually talking like legit stuff that happens. And when I started seeing several years ago, I started seeing this trend more towards hyper-focused on racial identity. And so I would hear young teenagers talking about things and hear phrases like this. Oh, I know what gunshots sound like. I'm black. And so it will hurt me. I'm like, whoa, like what are you, you're one saying that because you identify as, you know, black female teenager, that therefore you know what gunshots sound like, because like all black teenagers are experiencing gunshots. Like those things, I was going, whoa, like y'all are really getting hyper focused on race.
Yeah.
When the most successful people in the same neighborhoods that these teenagers were coming from, the people who had jobs, had, you know, kids, and those kids had kids, and, you know, so maybe they're grandparents now, they've paid off their homes, you know, so the home they've paid for, you know, 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, or 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. In this neighborhood, the house next door is a trap house, and they're selling, you know, drugs as fast as they can go, and there's gang activity. But this family has done everything right. And so it's like this idea of like trying to explain to teenagers, hey, the generation before you and even the generation before you in the same city, in the same neighborhood, did not necessarily think the way you are. They're not looking at life with these blinders and saying, I'm this category, right? So if is young black female teenager, that therefore now I have to fall in line with this. I have to know about crime. I have to be around gunshots. You know, I have to know someone who died, because that's what, you know, this means.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like I was just trying to explain to them, in America, one teenager can have a parent that can be from Ireland and a parent that can be from, say, Jamaica. And those parents could have grandparents or have parents that are, you know, Southern white Baptist, Muslim. I mean, like, you know, in America, everyone can match these categories. Now, what does that person fall under? You know,
well, it's more or less culture. I don't call it race. It's this, it's that, but I say it's more culture. You know, my culture is this. And in America, we are a blend of culture. Now, one last thing, and I'll let you go, and we'll end this. What about the UK commissioner saying that if anything gets spoken badly that's from America, he'll arrest? Because there's a UK. This has been going on for the last couple of weeks. Is a UK police chief said if anything like on the Facebook or X now, Twitter, if you say anything hateful or anything, we're gonna arrest you. What do you think about that one? That one's kind of funny.
Well, I think it's interesting. Anytime a police department or official in England talks about arresting someone in America that for hate-filled speech, I would want to know what their category is and what those terms are, because in America, I mean, that's a very very minute thing. Like, I mean, it's very hate speech is not as easy as a lot of people think it is. I think it's interesting when someone, I don't know, I kind of feel like that could be grandstanding. You know,
Yeah.
I want to say, like I always say, like, focus on violence first. Like,
Yeah.
if you are a police official, the first thing you need to do is focus on violence. And some people go, well, it starts with hate speech. Okay, maybe. But I can guarantee you there's at least 10 people in that jurisdiction that have warrants or already have pending charges for violence. Go focus on them first.
Yeah.
And maybe not worry as much about whatever words are being said over social media or that sort of thing.
I mean, me and my friend, if I'm friends with you, I'm gonna say some horrible things to your face. But when it comes around to it, we're gonna hug afterwards, and we're just joking around. So
yeah, I think that people have to, and we do this like every, I don't know, 20 years probably in our own society. We challenge, First Amendment. We challenge freedom of speech versus hate speech. That we did it as a society, 20 something, 30 years ago with burning of the American flag. Yeah, things like that. So it's interesting when someone in England makes a statement like that. I don't know what the motive is behind it. Like, I don't know why that is the way it is.
The whole motive of all that is, and this is a comedian that brought this up. In Russia, you had like probably about not even 400. I think it was like 40 people being arrested for what they said on the internet. Russia doesn't have freedom of speech like we have freedom of speech. UK is supposed to have freedom of speech, but it doesn't really have freedom of speech. Now, in that same time frame in UK, there was like 3,200 people that are getting arrested for what they said online.
Oh,
yes. The same thing in Canada and everything, everywhere else.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, threats are one thing, and it's very, I say, easy. Communication of threats. There are statutes written for that.
Yeah.
If someone is expressing what they don't like about something, that's different. And I think we've seen it obviously in America, where entertainers can hold up, what looks like the severed head of a president, and people can laugh about it and think this type of thing is funny. And then all of a sudden you get to, an attempted assassination. And then people have to understand, yes, there's a balance. Yeah. So, if you try to crush people's freedom of speech through arrest and that sort of thing, it'll come out, I think, in other ways. So I don't know. I don't know what sparked their push to do that so hard. They may have some issues over there that I know nothing about. They may have some terrorist cells that they're trying to, I don't know, focus on, whatever. I don't know. I did hear about it, and it was kind of like the buzz. Everybody's like, whoa, and then people joke like, what's England going to do? They're not going to come arrest me, kind of thing. It's like, I don't know. I don't know why they said what they said. I kind of want everybody that is sworn in a law enforcement position to prioritize, go after violence first, disrupt that, and then from there work your way down. If you can do that and get really good at that, other things come very, very easy. Problem solving for car break-in patterns become very easy. Talking to the public is very easy if you've done the really hard stuff. So that's about all I got to say about that.
The only thing, and we'll cut it off after this, is it's like right now you don't want to buy like a Ford Raptor or a Ford F-150 only because they're easily break in. I mean, they have all it is a screwdriver. You go in and you pop something and you're driving off with it. But thank you very much for coming on here, Brian. And check out the Disruptor podcast. He has plethora of people on there, and they're interesting too that he has on there. Plenty of guests. He's doing it more weekly now, to where I don't have to wait 3 to 4 months for the episode. And every person that he's had on there, I'm just like flabbergasted about what they have to say and everything, because they're very interesting people. But check that stuff out, and thank you all, and take it easy.